Welcome, everybody. Hello. Thank you for being here. Coming at you live from Brooklyn. This is Dal Grunga, along with my partner in crime, my ride or die, my wife, Rasika Gopi.
Hello.
We're co-hosting today, this morning, and we're so happy to be with you on Spirit Matters, your daily spiritual check-in from the Bhakti Center. We've been having some beautiful conversations today. Well, not today, but this week. Hoping to continue today. And before I launch in, I just want to check in. How you doing this morning, Rasika? How you doing? What do you want to share with the peeps?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. As I was mentioning earlier, just constantly dealing with the anarthas in the heart and working through them. It's taking it day by day, moment to moment sometimes. And yeah, just wrestling with one in particular that feels like it has a stronghold that is definitely a life lesson. So
Ooh, that sounds juicy. We're getting
it,
specific. Anarta, for those hearing the word for the first time, literally means the unwanted things in the heart. So arta means wealth. Like you have like Siddhartha, the book Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, meaning Siddha means perfection and arta means wealth. So Siddhartha, the word Siddhartha literally means the perfection of wealth. And when we look at wealth, we're not talking about just gold and riches and finances, but we're talking about what is of truly value, what is of true value. And so this idea of arta, meaning there's actually something called the Arta Forum, which is run by conscious entrepreneurs and industrialists about what is of true wealth. And I think I've heard Radhanath Swami quote this often. I don't know if he coined it or if he got it from somewhere, but he said you can calculate how truly wealthy a person is by counting the number of things they have that money can't buy. And so we talk about wealth and what is true wealth. And so when we look at this word anarta, that which is of no value, what are the anartas in the heart? And it's the things that strangle the creeper of love. There's beautiful analogies in the Bhakti tradition about the love in the heart being like a seed that gets planted in the garden, the soil of the heart. And so much of our spiritual life is tilling that soil of the heart through service, through our study, through our practice, so that that seed can get planted and grow and produce wonderful fruits. But as that seed grows into a beautiful vine and creeper before it produces fruits, it can get strangled by various weeds. And those weeds are our greed, our anger, our envy, our pride, our all the things in the heart that are non-reflective of the pure spirit soul, but are products of identifying with our material stories. So this word anarta, and we've been struggling with them. And in the chat, some of our we have a live Zoom studio audience here, and in our Zoom chat, somebody wrote, "The anartas and the ego can bother us so much. Thanks for acknowledging that and sharing your experience with that, which informs us in our own experience. Thanks for spilling your guts so that I feel less alone," which is part of what we do here. That's our tagline at Spirit Matters. We spill your guts so that you can feel better about yourself. And so, but a lot of people here have been appreciating the vulnerability this week and what you've been sharing, Rasika. And I had something to read about an artist. You talked about a very specific one. I don't want to call you out, but if you feel like you want to share, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I can read something that kind of encapsulates the overall concept we're looking at.
Well, I think they all boil down to a couple few ones for all of us. I know so many verses are coming to my mind, and I pulled them up as you were talking. And I just want to appreciate, I never knew that that's the root words, the root Sanskrit words of anartha are
Anarta,
artha. Yeah, that's
useless.
amazing. I love that. I love that. So yeah, two verses well, three, but one of them is Bhagavad Gita 4:10. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many, many persons in the past become purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attain transcendental love for me. And then another one where these anartas are referenced. So attachment, fear, anger is referenced there. And another one I think of often is in the 16th chapter, 16:21. There are three gates leading to hell. Materialistic consciousness, that samsara of repeated birth and death and material cycling,
Suffering.
suffering. Yeah. So there are three gates leading to this hell: lust, anger, and greed. Every sane man should give these up, for they lead to the degradation of the soul. Anyways, so there's like a few key like pillar anarthas, I think, lust, greed, envy. Mine seems to be anger. I get so frustrated and just disturbed by all the injustices in the world on a macro and micro scale. And it's definitely the little controller in me, and my ego likes to play the judge of the world and likes to split everything into black and white and who's on the right side of things and who's on the wrong side of things. And I think that it's rooted in these principles of what is good and virtuous and right. And sure, it might be, but I just get contaminated by that anger that pulls me down, because it's really not my place to be judging. And it really turns into criticism, even though I think it's coming from a righteous place. So that's like the dark, ugly side of my, it's like my virtue and also my vice. My virtue is like in higher states of consciousness. I can be, I think, I think have these high principles of compassion and consideration and generosity and being selfless. And but when I see others not acting from that place, I immediately then, somehow in my head feel justified in condemning these people for not having these high ideals. It's kind of like yeah, it's kind of like the darks, two sides of the same coin. So it's like, yeah, anyways, that's my ramble.
Why is that an anarta and something that you want to get rid of?
Well, it just pulls down my consciousness. It's like that quote we were talking about the other day. Is this the quote that you're going to read, or the one from Booker T. Washington, or should we just quote
No,
that?
but that is a great quote. Let's pull it up.
Yes.
Somebody Google that. I'll Google it while you talk about it.
Okay, my commentary on this quote coming ahead of the quote is that, yeah, I know my anger is one of these types of consciousness that pulls you down, and it's inherently coming from the ego wanting to control, or yeah, it's also separating me. It's othering other people. It's making me feel, even though I don't consciously think it's this way, but it's putting me in a superior position, as if I'm one to say, what's right and wrong, who's good and bad, who's acting appropriate and not. And ironically, in doing that, I get pulled down and my consciousness gets degraded, and I'm no better than what I'm so-called, I'm condemning or feeling so ruffled by.
Yeah. There's this quote by Booker T. Washington, who was an African-American educator, author, orator, and advisor to several presidents of the United States. And he lived in the late 19th, early 20th century. Between 1890 and 1915, he was a dominant leader in the African-American community. And so he wrote, where's the quote? I would permit no man, no matter what his color might be, to narrow and degrade my soul by making me hate him. And so the idea of that, like, sometimes it's very easy to to feel justified in my anger. And it's like, oh, well, I like, you hurt me or you did this to me, and therefore I have a license to now do the same thing to you, and I'm justified for it. But really what he's saying there, and what I'm getting from you, is that, like, regardless how justified I feel or don't feel, like, what is this doing to my consciousness? What is this doing to my soul? What is this? Yeah.
And I might not even want to do the same to them, because I'm better than that, but just in that level of consciousness and feeling those feelings and thoughts is a different type of but it's a different flavor of material consciousness. It's a different flavor of egoism. Maybe I would never, act the way they did, but I'm capable of harboring, anger. And yeah, it could be, I hate is such a strong word, but like strong aversion.
Strong aversion bordering on hatred. I wanted to read, thank you. I appreciate that a lot. And I think there's a lot that goes there. And I think that sometimes I think negative emotions get compounded in spiritual life because we deny them and we try to say that I just shouldn't be feeling this way. And I think that sometimes that we try to think, oh, I want this to go away. And therefore I'm just going to deny that I'm feeling that. I'm not going to allow myself to feel it. And then it kind of compounds. Like I'm just going to kink the hose, thinking that it's going to stop flooding, but actually it just kind of bursts the hose, and all of a sudden just all kinds of problems come about. And so I think it is something that is super important as spiritualists to find ways for us to acknowledge, because I think that what happens when you learn and you study spirituality, what you're constantly reading about is perfection.
Yeah.
When
Oh
you
God.
listen to classes, when you read books, when you hear stories of saints and sadhus, it's like you're just reading about perfection. And it's just like, none of us are perfect. And therefore, we just kind of like that gap between when you live in a community or when you follow a practice of very, very high ideals, it's natural that you either have large amounts of community members that are experiencing great shame or are feeling or being hypocrites. Not like, and I'm not even saying that as a critique, but just like, oh, I have to present myself in a certain way, which is different than how I actually am. Because if I let people know how I actually am, I'm going to get rejected. I'm not going to be accepted. I'm not going to be allowed into this circle anymore. I'm going to feel less than. And so I just have to kind of put on this front of being better than I actually am. And we lose we lose vulnerability. We lose authenticity. And it's in authenticity that we actually can get to the root of what's going on and allow us to work through that. What I was going to read was one of my favorite sections from one of my favorite books. Well, let's just read what Stephanie wrote here. I'm sorry. I read people's names, but then I realized I asked a while ago if I can read people's names. People appreciate it. She wrote, "We've got a wide, diverse audience, people all over the country and all over the world. We love you." Stephanie wrote, "One thing I'm learning is anger is a teacher of boundaries being crossed." Yes, that's true. Whether I'm crossing another's boundary or someone crossing my boundaries, once I recognize the boundary issues, I'm attempting to see what is in my control and what is beyond my control. When I can do this well, I can enter conversation with another with a little more compassion. It's such a large work in progress. And I think that's such a beautiful point about the idea of compassion, which when you look at the etymology of the word compassion, literally means to suffer with another person. So passion means suffer. I think etymologically in Latin roots. Like there was that movie a long time ago, The Passion of the Christ. I never saw that movie. Did you see that movie?
I don't think. Oh, I did. I did in like CCD in like 7th grade. Yeah.
You saw it? I never saw it because at the time, the late 90s or something, such an intense movie.
Yeah. For
Was it
some
hard to
reason,
stomach?
it was our CCD
Catholic,
viewing. Yeah.
Catholic, weekly Catholic after school
Sunday
program.
school, but it was on Tuesday for us. Yeah.
How was it?
What?
How was
It
it?
is intense. It is intense.
A
Very
super
graphic.
intense movie, very
Yeah.
graphic. It's the Passion of Christ, which literally, from what I understand, like the majority of the movie is a Christ suffering before
Yes.
being nailed to the cross. So being whipped, being beaten, just bleeding. And it's just like this intense graphic showing through the breakthrough technology of the 1990s, um, of the suffering of Jesus Christ. But it's called The Passion of the Christ.
Yeah.
And which literally means like the suffering of Christ. That's what the word suffering. Bring that up in the context of the word passion, meaning suffer, and compassion means to suffer with, compassion, that to suffer with another person. So the word compassion literally relates to the idea of identifying with another person's suffering. And so to be able to recognize that when somebody else is
Yeah.
experiencing anartas, they're experiencing anger, they're experiencing hate, they're hijacked by these lower qualities, they're suffering. Why are they suffering?
Mm.
Because it means that they're disconnected from their true self, because the true self is Sat Chit Ananda. It's eternal, it's full of knowledge, and it's blissful. And so for me to be cut off from my genuine self means I'm cut off from the natural joy of the soul, which means that I'm lost, I'm suffering. So to
Mhm.
be able to turn my hatred, my enmity, my animosity into an actual compassion of what's going on. Like, we are so covered right now. And to be able to do that, I think, because I think it's easy also sometimes to do that when you in a mood of superiority, like patronizing other people, like, I'm praying for you. Like somebody gets mad at you, you're like, you know what? I'm gonna end this conversation. I'm gonna pray for you. I'm going to pray for your anger. I'm going to pray for your hatred. I'm going to pray that you come closer to self and spirit. Goodbye. Like the sense of like, I'm above somebody else, but to actually recognize that, you know what, this person's lashing out, they're doing all these things, and the reality deep down, they're suffering. And I
Mm.
know, how do I know that? I know that because I've also suffered, and I
Mm.
suffer, and I know what it's like. I haven't shied away from my own self-awareness and what it's like to be consumed by these lower natures.
Yeah, and I think for me that my anger gets spills out when, like as I mentioned, I feel like people are acting without consideration of others, or they're being entitled, or they're being selfish, or they're anartas, they're acting out, and then that triggers me to get angry, which triggers an anarta in me. And so I think, I'm trying to get deep under it and see that it's really rooted in, like, I haven't really resolved my own imperfections and shortcomings and flaws and accepted that in within myself. So I can't accept that and allow grace and forgiveness easily for others, because I haven't extended that to myself. It's like I haven't let myself off the hook. And so I judge and critique myself for these this lower nature that rears its ugly head every so often. And so when I
mm,
see another person, it's like a target for my ego to just focus and be distracted by this other person. And so, yeah, it's complex. For me, it's not as simple as I just feel like a boundary has been crossed, because it just goes a little deeper. I do resonate with that, but it goes even deeper. I think it's like there's something within me,
mm.
there's that I haven't accepted and forgiven and extended that compassion to myself. And so it's hard for me when I see, transgressions being, especially against loved ones. I get
Yeah.
very protective, or against people who are innocent, or people who didn't do anything wrong, or actually, there's a misunderstanding. Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate and think that's quite profound when you're talking about like being able, like the word acceptance is a
Yeah.
powerful one, like radical acceptance. And I think that when
Yeah.
I'm experiencing shame and judgment of myself, or when I feel like I'm being misunderstood. Like I was writing about this recently, like last week or the week before, that the feeling of being misunderstood by other people, and
Yes.
the feeling of being misunderstood by people is uncomfortable when there's actually something that I'm not accepting within myself,
Yeah.
because the being misunderstood by somebody can bring into question my own being. Like, because if somebody else is misunderstanding me, or seeing me in a different way, it makes me question my very self, because
Right. Because you
there's a
don't have a
part
secure sense of self
I don't have a secure sense
to
of self.
anchor.
I don't have a
Yeah.
secure sense anchor. I don't have a secure sense of self. That's like, you know what? Like, somebody is allowed to have a misconception or alternate understanding, and it doesn't make me question my very being. Now, I think there's always a sense of self-awareness that allows me to like not get locked in to an identity around myself. Like, I'm always willing to see my blind spots, see things that I don't see about myself, and grow, etc. But I'm not looking and depending on other people validating my life's choices in order for me to have confidence in who I am. And so, like, a lot of times, getting other people to see my point of view or understand me or not be misinterpreted or judged by others stems from a lack of acceptance of self. And when there's a lack of acceptance of self, it becomes very hard to accept others, right? So now I'm seeing other people and struggling with their nartas, and it becomes really hard for me to accept them as they are and to be able to
Yeah.
extend that compassion because I haven't given it to myself. And so it's kind
Yes.
of like that thing. And I was thinking about I was just looking up that one of my favorite books and a really powerful author's name is David Rico, and he developed what he calls the 5 A's of relationships. And he wrote this book, How to Be an Adult in Relationships. Really powerful book, and he's written a number of books around this topic. But he has what he calls the 5 A's of relationships, meaning that there are certain things that we need to be able to offer and give and develop in relationships. And the first one is acceptance. It's just like, and he talks about acceptance, and how it ultimately they developed in deeper levels, like, okay, there's acceptance, and then there's affection, and there's appreciation, and then it kind of, attention. There's these different types of A's, but one of them is literally just acceptance. And when he talks about acceptance, it means to actually understand and to allow somebody to be who they are and where they are at without
Yes.
feeling like you need to change in order for me to accept you.
Yes.
Acceptance isn't always necessarily like, acceptance is just like, it's almost like this, just, I see you. I
Yes.
see you and I accept you, like, for where you are and where you're at.
Yeah, and that ties back to what I think we talked about this when we were talking about relationships and marriage, and how like the foundational ingredient to respect is acceptance. Because in a marriage,
Mm,
like, you realize you come across the other's shortcomings and flaws, and their ego, that and their the purification and healing journey that they're on from shedding the ego. And it's like you have to accept them for where they're at on their healing journey, on their spiritual growth journey. And so it's very evident when you're in like a partnership and marriage, but when you see it all around in community or out there in the world with people you're not even in relationship with.
yeah, totally.
But yeah, also going back to something you were saying is like this, yeah, well, back to the acceptance part of it is because I'm expecting myself to be perfect and have these high ideals, like you were mentioning early on, like most of the spiritual texts we read are all about like spiritual perfection and
Yeah.
aiming for that. And it's like, because I don't allow myself that grace and I expect myself to be perfect, like that anger, I can't give towards another. I can't give up because I'm also unconsciously expecting them to change and be perfect and to act differently in
Mm.
order for me to accept them.
Yeah, totally.
And when you verbalize it, it sounds absurd.
We sound nuts when we actually talk about how we operate in life. There's a couple of good just chats here that I was appreciating. Jenna Vutzler wrote, compassion, having passion, and it means taking action to help others, but knowing that they are not broken and in need of fixing. I think that's the acceptance part of like wanting to help and be compassionate, but realizing it's like, because if I think that I need to fix you, then there's not an acceptance. And I think this happens a lot of times in relationships where there's a sense of like, we feel that the other person is trying to fix me because it's like, well, once they kick that habit, then we'll be, once they change this about themselves, and it's like, oh, so you actually don't love me as I am. Once I kind of refine myself a little bit, like, what if I don't? What if I don't kick this habit? What if I don't develop this new habit? What if I don't change this part about me? Is that a deal breaker? Which sometimes it is. That's okay. You should own that, but you shouldn't be like, okay, we're working towards, like, there's an acceptance of somebody as they are. And I think that acceptance is the place in which we can actually find genuine connection.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking of that Al-Anon version of the Serenity Prayer. Al-Anon is like 12-step
Yeah,
program for adult children of
yeah.
alcoholics, which we both.
ACOA, the ACOA version.
Oh, the ACOA version, though, yeah, which we both, been part of those 12-step programs. And it's God grant me the serenity to accept the person I cannot change, the courage to change the one I can, and the wisdom to know that one is me. The only person I can change is me. I can't change another. And so acceptance is vital for peace of mind because you're
Yeah.
literally never going to change or control another person.
Yeah, totally. Martha wrote in the chat, I love that a lot because I think well, let me scroll. There's a lot of good chats here. I can't read them all. But here's one that stuck out to me. Somebody wrote, there's so many chats coming up here.
Yeah,
Where
I
there was
can't.
Sydney wrote, she's seen this entitlement as well and have realized it is me that has a tendency to act entitled, sometimes
Mm,
like a toddler throwing a fit. I
mm.
appreciated that because you were giving that serenity prayer for adult children, and then I was reading from David Rico, who wrote that book, How to Be an Adult in Relationships. Because actually, the reality is that a lot of times we're still operating the way we did as children. It doesn't
Right,
mean like, okay, you're just a big child. It just means that like, yeah, time has passed, but like the wounds and the operating systems in which I learned and how to function and get what I want from the world are still running the show sometimes. And it's like learning, because what happens is as children, we naturally are not designed to ask for what we need. There's a sense in which our caretakers are supposed to understand it and give it to us, you
well, we
know?
also don't have the words and ability yet
We
to
don't have the words
articulate
and
what we
ability to
need.
communicate. It's like, I
Yeah,
just know how to cry. That's it. But it's not like I know, oh, I need food every couple hours. I need to sleep. Like we don't even know I need to sleep. It's like, oh, you need to go to bed now. Or like I go outside and I don't have a jacket because I don't realize I need to stay warm. Or I don't realize that like I need to
right.
take medicine. Or I don't realize I need to take my vitamins. Like there's all the things I don't realize what all of my needs are. I don't even realize that like I need someone to listen to me and to love me and to like, I need an apology or like whatever it is. Like there's a sense where like as loving caretakers are supposed to be able to understand the needs of the child and provide them. It's not like the child has to ask for everything because we're not, our brain isn't developed in that sense. But what happens is, as we don't get that often enough as children, and so as we grow into adults, we don't realize like, okay, now I'm an adult. I have to ask for what I need.
Mm,
And I also have the ability to provide it for myself sometimes. But because as children, we don't get those needs filled, we just kind of develop this sideways way of trying to manipulate it out of people, out of a survival mechanism that is useful as kids. But as we grow up into adults, we don't realize that like I need to leave those ways behind me and develop and recognize that actually I have the faculty as an adult to make decisions for myself, to recognize and self-reflect and understand my needs and recognize the ways in which I can or can't provide them for myself or get them from other people. And so there's oftentimes this sense, and that's why it's a really big part of the Serenity Prayer, is to recognize that I have the ability to understand what I need. I have the ability to make changes in my life. I have the ability to accept myself and provide that and give that to others. Um, all right, we had a great conversation. We're running out of time here. That's what we do. We run until we're out of gas. I think there's a lot more to be discussed. I think you were
oh,
about to
so
say
much.
something. There's a lot
Yeah.
going on. There's so many good stuff going on here to chat. Can't keep up with all of it. Thank you guys all so much. We turn it over here to Kimberly, who wraps things up for us. And so if you wanted to pull away something that you can take away and jot down, take notes, share with a friend, post it on your social media, this is the time to listen in, and Kimberly will wrap it up for us. What you got, Kimberly?
All right, we got some good gems today. Krishna guides us to clear out the weeds. Vulnerability and authenticity allows us to get to the root. Don't kink the hose, acknowledge the negative emotions. Anger can be our teacher to extend more acceptance to ourselves. Anchor that secure sense of self, and we're accepted where we are and at.
Mm.
Yeah.
I got a really big kink in my hose. I think I kinked it a few years ago. It's been the water pressure's building up. What are you walking away with, Rasika? What's your takeaway for today? What's your closing word?
My closing reflection is that when we feel overly preoccupied with others and controlling them and judging them and criticizing them, it's because we feel out of control in our own life. We've lost that sense of self and anchor, and we haven't extended ourselves compassion. And that starts at home. And also, I'll just end on a quote, a Bhagavad Gita quote that I also wanted to share earlier. That is one I take shelter in when I'm feeling all these feelings. Chapter 9:22. But those who always worship me with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have.
I'd ask you to say more about that verse, but that'd be a whole nother podcast episode. Maybe
We can start tomorrow with that. Remind us all to start.
We'll start tomorrow with that. Thank you so much. I'm walking away with acceptance. Acceptance. I accept all of you guys. Done. I'm done judging. I'm just accepting. Wait, hold on. Maybe it's easier said than done. But I think because I've been thinking a lot about that this week, thinking about my inner judge and the way that the judge, I think judgment is in some ways the antithesis of acceptance, that kind of not seeing the way in which somebody else might be suffering, because they're trapped in their own anartas, and being able to identify that by acknowledging the way I'm trapped in my own. And so just trying to operate with a little bit, I'm a sharpshooter, hot-blooded Italian that can sometimes just jump to conclusions, and and I think just lowering down the intensity and the volume can help create greater levels of peace, acceptance, and ultimately connection. So thank you guys all so much. Thank you for listening, tuning in. We're so grateful and glad that you are here. As always, please go rate and review us wherever you're listening to your podcast episodes. We do this live every day. If you'd ever like to join our live audience, just write to us at spiritmatters@bhakticenter.org. And we're happy to give you the Zoom info, or you can just go to Spirit Matters at the Bhakti Center website. I think the Zoom info is there also. But we love you and appreciate you. We're glad you're here. We got one more episode tomorrow, Friday, and we will see you then. Bye-bye.